TJ just said sometimes you feel like we should start That's pretty good quiet. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Mr. Cusick, if you would please call roll.
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Present.
Ms. Harless.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone, to our February 12th. January almost came out of my mouth there, and it's already February 12th Board of Education meeting. My name is Nikki Hudson. I have the pleasure and privilege of being our board president this year. To my far left is Kelly Davis, who is our board vice president, and then Amber Epling Skinner, who is a board member, our treasurer TJ Cusick, our superintendent Dr. Bauer, our board member Stephanie Harless, and board member Jennifer Best. If you would please join us with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If I could get a motion to approve our agenda as published for tonight's meeting, February 12th.
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments? No changes? Okay. If you will please call for the vote.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries. It is now visitor comment time, and if you'll bear with me for just a second, I will read a portion that we have published in our agenda that just reminds everyone about this particular portion of our meeting. The school board and administrative staff encourage and appreciates community interest in meetings of the Board of Education. This section of the agenda is designed to hear the views of community members about their schools and items on the agenda. Each speaker will be asked to address the board at the visitor's podium, which is right there, so that the speaker's remarks may be heard clearly. The speaker should give their name and address and limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Unless we have more speakers, which I don't think that's an issue tonight, where we sometimes have to limit the time. We remind all speakers that our district values and respects all people as they are, and that our district is committed to creating and maintaining safe spaces for all of our students and community members. We want to remind our community that we value public input and always appreciate when our community members remember our district's values, refraining from using harmful or offensive language, and for sharing your comments in a civil and respectful manner. It is not our usual practice to respond to remarks during the visitor comment section of our meeting. And let's see, our first visitor is Dingledine is going to join us. Mike, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I see some new faces. So I am Mike Dingledine, architect with CDA, part of the Shore CDA team. But when I say team, I really want to include Russilli in the district. I think the success of this project to date has been because we're working together so well. We're facing challenges together. We're figuring them out on a daily basis, and we're adapting and punting when we have to, and it's working. So we're on schedule and under budget, and those are great words to hear. We've decided to split this up into 3 different nights and try to focus on one project each night. So tonight is Thomas. So we'll show you and some of the newer board members some history of the design. We'll talk about some of the adapting we're doing now that we're getting close to phase 2, which is the most complex phase of Thomas Worthington. And then, give you a bit of an update on the design. So, I preceded my slide, design review summary, phasing timeline, and impact on operations. The hard one on the bottom, I'm going to leave to Randy Banks. He's the one that's in the center of that, so he's going to explain some of those critical things to you. This is our existing site. It scared me to death when we first looked at it. There's so much asset here. There's so much development here, so much history here, and quite a big building. In fact, stretching 850 feet east to west. And one of our big objectives and aspirational goals was to create a much more efficient envelope and a much more efficient school from getting to point A for point B. And the secondary advantage of that is we were able to put a lot more amenities on the site where the building used to sit. So we have additional parking. We've gotten the softball field up on the top. We've been able to think about the future natatorium and parking, and definitely think about site safety, both for vehicles and pedestrians. So all that's been a part of our accomplishment. This is kind of just one of those tools we've been working with, and again, with the district, with the construction manager, how we're going to see these circulation patterns on the site going to the future. And in fact, since we did this initially at the beginning of design, we've also started working with the city to do a multimodal path along 161 Dublin-Granville Road, which will connect to the city infrastructure. So we have been, again, working outside of our team timeframe and group as well with the city. This is the schedule I showed you last year, I guess closer to February. Well, yeah, last year. We're in February again, just like you. And I just moved the blue line. This is the good news. The plan as we saw it at the beginning of 22 and as we fashioned it and as Russilli has executed it has stayed intact. We haven't lost any time in these phases. We are reconsidering some of the pieces and parts that go into these phases, but the timeline is, in a sense, is still intact and still on track to happen. And so everything that you see on the timeline is still in place a year later. We're in the middle of that big phase 1 red line, but we are coming up on phase 2 on schedule. This was the hard part, understanding that we had a building we wanted to be the future long-term Thomas. Doesn't really take into account anything about how you get there from point A to point B. And so this was a complex phasing plan developed, especially with Russilli, because they had to take parts of the building down strategically, surgically, to be able to get other parts of the building up. And the parts of the building we got up had to turn around and do something important for the space we were losing. So we decided to take 12,000 square feet first out of the way of Thomas Phase 1, because Thomas Phase 1 is the entire academic classroom wing, 3 stories, lots of new square footage. And so it became a very important accomplishment, and it's a very nice, clean place that we're going to start in service this fall, and that all the new academic space for the new Thomas is going to be up and running in this next school year. This gets a little harder, not because of the space that it is, but because it is the transition. Currently, it's Main Street in Thomas High School. It's the original Thomas entry. It's the auditorium. It's the music wing. It's the cafeteria kitchen. It's the stuff that is kind of the core of the original Thomas. So we need to take it out for the next part. And we decided, and this is where complications arise, and this is where everyone gets involved. We decided we needed most of the kitchen prep area and some of the kitchen's serving area in order to get the entire piece of the building we need up. And so we've gotten Brian Hunt involved. We're looking at how we would satellite food, because for a school year, we might not be prepping food at Thomas. We would be prepping food somewhere else in the district and still serving here in our cafeteria. So the original concept was to get the new kitchen and new cafeteria and new administrative area of the building done. But in fact, and everybody started to see this as we went through these phasing plans, The mechanical room and the electric service and the HVAC service that serve these parts of the new building are going to be in that orange area. So by expanding that and taking that down, we are able to make phase two both what we originally thought would be phase two and phase three of a new construction. And so this will start together and go on together, and we will have the services in terms of electric power and HVAC to serve this entire building instead of just the first piece. So it does cause that kitchen and food prep complication, but then it just leaves us this area of the the east end of Thomas that we're going to keep using for swing space, but we won't have to tear it down until the entire building is done. So it's a cleaner step from phase to phase, and it allows us to do things that allow us to keep more building online and allow us to get more new building online. And so we get much better milestones for the students in the building. I'm going to let Randy talk about this because this was a really important concept.
Thank you, and thank you, Mike. I would just like to echo what he said. Excuse me, I think that our team has done a fantastic job. There's been a lot of collaboration on a very complicated problem. Mike has over 50 slides to show you about Thomas, and I'm going to talk about the impact on our community and our students in just 5 slides. So if you will, stick with me here. This slide shows you what school will be like for students next year. The red line would be how a typical student would enter the west end of the current building, come through the auxiliary gymnasium. Notice that they're hugging the wall there because 2 of those courts could be impacted with music classrooms. So the music classrooms are now gone in that big void in the middle of the screen. Those will be relocated to the aux gym. And students coming from that west end would have to cut through the aux gym, through a set of double doors into our new building. They could then cross through the new academic building, and if they happen to have class in the old building, there would be 2 ways for students to kind of transition into the old building or perhaps go to the cafeteria. And one would be by heading north. This again is outside of the building. They would head north and they would be able to connect to that building. There would also be in blue there a set of stairs depending on the direction that you're going to go. So we do want you to know that with every construction project, there are times when there's inconveniences. We started that by having teams without locker rooms at the field house. We now have band that's been practicing behind the school instead of their traditional spot. We have a wrestling team that's been practicing on the 2nd story of the auditorium. And as we begin this phase, there's going to be groups that are going to be impacted as well. An important thing to note, however, is that most of our teachers will be in their final permanent assignment once this building opens up. So that's good news for staff. It's good news for students because they will be located where they will be when the entire project is done. For most of them, there won't be a double move. So we think that's a positive. Going back to this chart, you'll see a green line. Those green line mark entrances for students on the front of the building. Talking with Principal Scully, it's his intention to have students either come in the west end, especially if their parents are dropping them off, but also some bus riders could continue to come in the west end like they do now. But the main entrance of the school will also be open. So it's important to note that they could travel along the front of the school on the sidewalk and come into the main entrance if they would like. Obviously, theater, band, and the arts are going to be impacted the most. Those classrooms will be reassigned to other places in the building. I kind of covered that music piece. If you can envision that aux gym, they're going to build temporary walls in that aux gym. They're going to use their current locker or music storage that will be brought in that will serve as a wall for that space so that instruments can be secure. And we'll make sure that the arts have the best possible space that they can have under those conditions. There will be some limited use of the 2nd story of the old building. So the part on the far east side closest to Evening Street, we are going to have to use some of those classrooms. This creates some accessibility challenges, and therefore we are going to install a lift that will be installed on the southeast corner of that building so that that upstairs is accessible because there will no longer be access through the old elevator and the new elevator will be in the new building and won't be connected to the part that we're tearing down. So we want you to know that there will be some challenges with traffic. It's only for this year, and then we think that a lot of that's corrected. But the team at Thomas Worthington, along with many of the people represented here tonight, have worked especially hard to make sure that they are eliminating as many obstacles as possible. Mike mentioned no kitchen. This certainly will have an impact on students. We are working with our food service team to make sure that many varieties and options will still be prepared at another location. We will have food storage, so there will be supplies and things that can be stored despite the lack of a kitchen, but they still will have an eating area. So food will still be served at Thomas. They will still have room to eat and spread out, but the food will actually be prepared at another location and brought in daily. Again, that's a one-year problem, and we think that they are well on their way to coming up with some solutions that will work, and a site. Obviously, this involves staff as well. They'll need to be relocated and maybe divided so that they can begin preparing the food. On a positive note, before I leave this slide, Mr. Gehring's been doing battle with the Thomas Worthington basement for many, many years. And in this picture, you can see that that basement's gone. So we just have one spring season to get through. This next slide, there's a little blue, and Mike mentioned this, but there's a little blue rectangle at the northwest corner of this. A lot of work went into that very little space, but they switched the power supply. That's already done. And then I just used this slide to highlight those 2 pinch points. So when you have this many students traveling, it's important, and Pete's well aware of this. He plans to have our hallway monitors kind of stationed at these areas, but you could potentially have a few traffic jams at certain times of the day based on traffic flow from students traveling from the academic building for an elective in the gymnasium, or the other way if you have students coming from the cafeteria back to the main academic building. It's important to note that. I will also mention that we're going to have to relocate the clinic. That will go into the old building, and that will have access to the parking lot in case a parent needs to pick up their child. Student services like counseling and mental health specialists will be relocated to that area as well. And our principal offices, they will be spread throughout the old building and the new academic building, taking advantage of some small conference rooms so that we would still have Molly in the academic wing, administrators in the Molly would be in the athletic wing, administrators would be in the academic wing, and then in the old building, there would also be administrators stationed there. So they'll be spread out as well. Again, just for that 1 year, and then their offices will be complete. Moving to the next slide, this one was just put in to illustrate how complicated this puzzle is. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. However, I would like to highlight 2 things. I'd like to first highlight the fact that you can see that memorial walkway that we talked a lot about during the design that connects the west end of Thomas Worthington to our stadium. It serves as a safe way for students to navigate that parking lot. It also serves as a way to divide the parking lot for buses and parents and keep that center open, and another way to recognize students who have passed away, and having trees and memorial stones throughout the property will all be condensed to that one area where they can be properly recognized. So we're excited about that feature, which will be now done in 2025. It will not impact this summer. The other piece I want to point out is on that front driveway. When Mike shows you the pictures of Thomas Worthington, you'll see this beautiful drive that goes east to west. But I want to point out that blue section. In next year, it will be paved in front of the school until you get to that blue section. That will be a gravel road because there will be a lot of construction traffic that will travel over that gravel road. So while it will be open for visitors to come in and park in the parallel parking in front of the new building, when they exit towards Evening Street behind the MAC, they will need to take advantage of that gravel road, and it won't be paved until the following year. So that's highlighted in blue. Certainly will have impact on visitors to our school, but we don't think that will change their traffic pattern at all. This next slide has a lot happening here. The first thing that I'd like to point out is the back of the building will be closed. They will use that as a laydown area for construction on Thomas Worthington, contractor parking. You will no longer be able to cut through the back of the property from Evening Street to the student parking lot, like many in the community do. We will also lose over 100 staff parking spaces in the back, which creates a little bit of a challenge. Moving to the left, you will see that the student parking lot will remain in blue. It's probable that we'll designate some of those spots as staff parking as well, just to make sure that we're covering ourselves for days that we have substitute teachers, traveling teachers, but it's probable that that will occur. And we've had a lot of conversation about the laydown area for the natatorium. Because that's a separate project, they'll need a separate area, a separate trailer. At this point, we've landed on that north section, trying to keep it out of the way and in the less desirable parking spaces. So they will fence that area in red, and that will be their laydown area for the pool project, which means there will be times throughout the project where equipment needs to go from that area in front of our stadium down to that natatorium that you can see down in the southwest corner of the property. We're going to lose that hill. So if you've been to the pool on fireworks night and enjoyed the view from the hill, that hill will be gone next year. That will be fenced in, and they'll begin work on the natatorium in that area. And then finally, working our way counterclockwise to the front of Thomas Worthington, I just want to point out two features that we have currently in the plans. There's a gray square there, which at this point is designated as the temporary band practice field. At this point, the field is gravel. It will be compacted, and it's going to be designed similar to that of what they're using in Gahanna. So I talked with Principal Scully today, and our band directors were on their way to Gahanna to inspect that, just to make sure that it meets their standards and it will meet their needs for next year. That parking lot then could also be used as emergency parking for larger events at our school. In orange, you'll see a second lot. That lot would be designated as staff parking. And if I went back to the other slide, this allows our teachers to park in front of the building, again, temporarily. That too, at this point, would be a gravel lot. And they would exit the building by moving east on the one-way path in front of the school. So in regards to parking, and then I'm sure you'll have questions when we get to the end, I just want to say that we are going to lose some parking. So I mentioned over 100 spots in the back. I think currently if you use that band practice area as well as the orange area, we would gain more than we lose. But then when you count the laydown area in the student lot, they're probably down just a few spots. But what that means is we're going to have to plan a little better so that we don't have conflicts. We're probably not going to be able to house 3 events on that property at the same time like we oftentimes do. Some of our events that are larger may need to be scaled down during this period. Some of our users that take advantage of renting our space at Thomas Worthington during the next year and a half may not be able to take advantage of that based on the challenges that are presented here. But we wanted you to know that it will impact our community. We're hopeful we'll still be able to successfully operate a swimming pool and the operation there, as well as all of our summer events. But it certainly will look different for the upcoming year. And then this last slide just gives you an idea of what the traffic flow will look like. So I'll start with the purple line. This would be the line that visitors who are just coming to the school for a meeting or dropping something off that is not during arrival or departure time. So we don't want them competing with school buses in that loop. But that would be an available option where they could park in a parallel spot, run in the school, have a quick meeting, drop something off, meet with the teacher, and then exit onto Evening Street. In red would be our bus areas or options. You notice we have 2 areas for buses, and that's currently how we run the buses. That would remain unchanged. And then in green, you will notice the parent loop no longer goes to the back of the building. We feel like, again, we're going to have to designate some teacher spots, but this still provides a long enough loop that we're going to be able to get cars off of 161 and kind of retrain parents to follow. And then hopefully they won't cut that corner into the student lot. We have some strategies to kind of keep them flowing. They'll go around that laydown area and then exit out the athletic entrance. So again, traffic flow will be impacted. We'll be able to probably probably live with this for most of 2 years until the final, the baseball field and the softball field are complete in the back. But we wanted you to know that that will impact people in the morning and the afternoon when it comes to school. So with that, I'm going to let Mike kind of go through the slides so you get to see what Thomas Worthington's going to look like, and then I'll be back to answer any questions that you might have. Answer all the questions. No.
So yeah, you can see that Randy worries about more every day than I do. So this is the overall. Thomas, again, can't believe how much this is going to feel like it's been here forever. It's going to fit on the site exactly like it was supposed to. The big amenities like the big setback, the green front yard is going to be great. The fields out there will be great. Great place to be. The compactness of the building will mean travel inside is great. So we really feel like the massing and overall structure of the building worked. We worked with ARB, and we all know that Worthington ARB is a challenge. And we got through all the issues of scale and articulation and style. And we're very much a Jeffersonian style that's very much compatible with Worthington. We had to ask for a variance because of the 3-story building and the cupola. We were up around 70 feet, which exceeded Worthington's limit. But we got that variance because we all felt, including them, that this made for a great scale, especially with the setback that it has from the road. This is the view today, and it's very exciting because when you drive on 161, you can't help but want to look and see. And it feels, the scale feels great. And it's, again, lots of structure and construction activities in the front yard. But now you can see the wall of the building starting to be come down. And I heard the tower's coming soon in the next couple weeks. So we're going to get to see the top of the building set in place. It'll be exciting. One of the end piers of the building. And the inside spaces. So it's coming along very fast. Again, everything's going according to plan. No problems at all, Matt, right? Every day's easy. There's the front section being put into place. This is the view from the west. As you can see, the Memorial Drive, that walk that Randy talked about. Again, buses on one side, parents on the other. This is going to be a great way to control traffic and give traffic plenty of space to queue. It's also going to improve kind of the access and the importance of the west entrance, which doesn't align with the parking lot currently today. And the feel of this is going to be great because there's going to be a safe pedestrian space, a safe car space, and a safe bus space. And so we feel very good about that. From the back, you can see we've got the varsity softball field involved. We've gotten parking back. We've got the outdoor contained courtyard behind the big glass wall you see there, which is the student commons. And everything will continue again in the future across the back of the building. So we'll have 360-degree access for fire and safety, but also for controlling traffic flow. This is new. This is the east entry. This is the fine arts entry of the building. It will be on access with the west entry. And so now there will be a facade and an entry on all 4 sides of the new Thomas. And this is looking from over the MAC back at the building. You can see, again, some of the differences. And the new parking lot on this side, the staff parking lot, and the ability to have parking address the fine arts side of the building as well as the athletic side of the building. And coming in a couple weeks, we'll be back to you. The natatorium has been through ARB and been approved. So we're feeling very good about that. It goes again through all the same architectural elements and pieces and parts and colors that Thomas does. So it's going to feel very much compatible on the site. And as Randy said, it's coming down the hill. It's going to be closer to the road, but it's going to have a great feel. And again, provides for some additional parking where the old natatorium will eventually come down. And it does not affect the outdoor pool operations. That's to come, however they want to figure that out. This was the big idea moment, the napkin moment for the whole building, the idea that kids thrive in different places and different activities in a building. And so we knew that from a gym and an athletic side to a fine arts auditorium side, those are easy to understand the differences, but there's now a continuous datum through the entire building, east to west. The more exciting part, and something we're doing at Kilbourne as well, is going from the most formal academic type of spaces, the traditional classrooms, to the media center that breaks into small group spaces and softer and quieter spaces, to the student commons that's going to have a lot of different looks and feels, again, a lot more like Kilbourne has already done, and then to the brand new outdoor commons that is self-contained and it will have furniture and breakout spaces. And so somewhere along this blue line, every student will find their favorite spot in this building and they will thrive. And that's what we were very excited about getting done at both high schools. So here's the entrance coming off the main drive, or the main front. You come in, there's a connection from this academic side of the building all the way through. You're looking down all the way through to the center core, the rotunda of the building. But kind of exciting out on the right there, to get the daylight to the academic part of the building and to the fine arts part of the building, we have something we've been calling Art Alley. And it's a space that'll access those labs in terms of big things coming in and out, having kids be able to work outside from the theater to the art rooms. But it also is a place that is safe and self-contained and secure because it's got a gated entrance. So it's part of the internal part of the building, yet it's an outside space. This is the main rotunda. This is where the academic north and south quarter connect and intersect with the fine arts to athletic quarter. Again, we're still in a LVT type of space today in terms of our floor finish, but we're still working through some options to upgrade that. As you get upstairs, same thing. This is the entrance to the media center, and again, the core connector to these parts of the buildings. Very exciting space, lots of daylight coming down in the middle of the building. This is the media center. It's up a level above again, right outside of that rotunda, upper level. And it's very exciting because it's a quieter sort of breaking out space. It has small rooms, large rooms, but it also has a visual connection to the outside through that north glass wall and over the student commons. And again, we're excited about those connections. Now, as you get closer to that window, you can see down into that space. And as well, you can see outside into that landscaped courtyard. This was our image a year ago for the cafeteria, and all three ladies who were here that night pushed back a little bit on the red, it being too much, and we agreed. We think it is. We had the idea of having large swaths of color in the reds and the whites and the blues in the building, and we've changed that to be more accent colors, borders and stripes, rather than these large areas. So this is the newer, updated version, and you can see we've reduced the red to border stripes and accent stripes around the circle in the rotunda. And so we hope we're getting there. We still have a lot to do in terms of the final flooring selections. And when we do that, we'll come back to you with the final flooring finishes and renderings. But this is, again, a great space, 10,000 square feet. It can be way more than just a cafeteria. Again, much like Kilbourne has always been since it was built new. It has the opportunity to focus lots of activities, and you can see the media center up there at the upper level. This is to the auditorium to the right, the student commons to the left. Again, this is a pre-function space for the auditorium now because of its location and the way we located the entry. This is the view from coming down the stairs from the upper level of the media center overlooking, again, the student commons. And this is really exciting because this is not only outdoor space, it's well landscaped and well furnished outdoor space, it's also secure outdoor space. So this isn't wandering out to the parking lot. This is a contained space that opens to the student commons, the internal side of the building. And we really want to raise the level of types of seating, types of furniture, types of places for students to gather. And obviously low maintenance landscaping that can be in here, but students can even be a part of that maintenance. And again, the bridge at Kilbourne is hopefully accomplishing the same thing. So we're very excited that we've pulled both of these high school concepts together at the same. So that's the big stuff. We are, again, on target, on budget, and you can see Emily smiling because she's not worrying about these things every day anymore. But Jeff is, and Randy is, and I know Pete is. He's not smiling that much these days. But they're figuring it out, and they're doing it. And again, I guess the last thing is I went back to our very first meetings that Randy hosted in November of 21. We started talking about our design goals. They were aspirational goals. And these came from students and teachers. And it was surprising how much they've kept solid throughout the same process and how important it was to hear from students that, phasing is important. I'm going to be a sophomore when this starts and a senior when this finishes. I don't want my entire high school career to be in a trailer or in a modular classroom. And in fact, very much the solutions that Russley came up with means they're going to be in a lot of new space before they're a senior at this high school. So I think these are all still, the idea of there's a student experience here, there's sustainability in terms of architecture, there's asset value that we saved on the site, which very much worried me. Safety was big, students and teachers. And then, this stuff that Randy sweats every day, which is the operational phasing and being thoughtful about student experience now, not just when this building is new. So questions for me, questions for Randy, questions for the whole team. We'll be happy to.
Thanks, Mike. Obviously, a very complicated process that requires a great deal of collaboration, which is already visible in what you've shown us today. Does anybody want to be the first one to go? Okay, thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
And all the pictures. Some of those we had seen and some of it was new. So
Yes.
we really appreciate it. It's nice to hear you're on schedule. We keep hearing that. And when I drove by on Saturday, it was a beautiful day and there were workers out there. So that kind of made me happy to see the working continuing every time there's a nice day. I know there are going to be some delays when school starts this fall. Is there any chance of not being delayed, of being ahead? Are we planning on a delay? Is that definite?
Well, Pete has established a team to deal with that delay. We know that we have not fallen farther behind. They're working very, very hard to keep us on schedule and maybe even make up some time. But at this point, that committees continues to work on solutions for that 12 or I think it's like a 13-day delay because we wouldn't take the building until September.
Okay. And then I have some questions about the parking with the back lot being closed. I thought it was going to be a year, but is it 2 years that it's going to be?
I said
No
that there
parking behind?
would be work back there. So it's very possible that once the building is complete in January of 26 and they have that auditorium, I think that's the date, that the thoroughfare would be open, but there would still be work in the back on the athletic fields and that parking lot. So it would be at least a year, probably longer.
Right, more. And as far as student parking, I don't know, we have plenty of student spaces, is that right? Like there's no lottery, there's enough spaces, and will there continue to be spaces for the students?
Yeah, Russilli put a drone up and took pictures in the fall of how full our lot was at various times. So we are aware that students get driver's license throughout the year and more students drive to school. So that number will probably grow. But even if we account for that laydown area, we think that we'll have enough spaces for a normal school day. Now, if there's an event at the same time as school, guest speakers, career day, that kind of thing, it could put a strain on the lot. But for a normal school day, I think we're feeling comfortable. It's the events, trying to keep school event parking from going across the street to the neighborhood is really one of our challenges right now. And we're looking at some temporary parking, possibly overflow parking down in the flats on one of the baseball fields. It could be grass parking, it could be gravel parking, but we're trying to just evaluate that. For every dollar we spend for temporary fixes takes away from the long-term goal of the project. So we're keeping that in account.
Okay, because I'm assuming the neighborhood probably doesn't want hundreds of cars there, but that could be an issue with that. So I think that's all I have for now. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Stephanie, do you want to go next?
Thank you.
Sure.
I've only been sitting here for a little while, but I have seen this kind of go through on
Good.
that side. So it's so I've been following it. So I appreciate the update. I just have a couple questions and maybe a couple comments. There was a picture of the flow in the auxiliary gym where the band classrooms are going to be. Are they going to be walled off so people are walking around the walls, or is there potential for people to be like disruptive of the classes?
So if you picture the 4 basketball courts in the Aux gym, they will have at least one of those courts for the entire music program that's in there. So that would be fenced or walled off, and they would have their own area. Now, it's probably not going to go all the way to the
Right.
ceiling, so that noise is going to travel. But during class change, students may kind of hug that wall,
Okay.
be outside of their area, perhaps in between the wall, temporary wall and the permanent wall, and they would exit through that Aux gym for
Okay.
class change. So we have some work to do with supervision, maybe add another camera in there to make sure that we're monitoring behavior. But I think at this point, it gives them a designated area, and it also puts it very close to that practice field right out front so that when they're practicing, they won't have to go far.
Okay. And that leads me into my next question. There was the practice field out front, and then there was the area down, right? The orange area, or the gray area that you said was going to be gravel. How big is the gravel one?
I think I'll tell you, I think I recall, Matt, 75 parking spots per square. Is that correct?
Yeah, 180,
So-
180 feet square.
Okay. So the intention is that for most of the practice, they're out on the other area, right?
The intention is when the band practices, they would be on the gray square.
Okay.
And that would have temporary fence around it to keep cars off of it.
But that's
And
not a
then-
full football field size, right?
It's
So
a
they're still
full,
going to be.
full width, and it's 30 to 30 yard
30
line.
to
So
30, okay.
it's, you know, it's practicable, and it's, and
Okay.
much of their staging occurs between the 30 and the 30, but
Okay.
it's not the full football width.
Yeah, the other thing we've talked about with our athletic director, because we now have 2 turf fields, as the band's preparing for a major contest or even the first show, they'll have time to go down to the turf and practice on one of the turf fields that are marked appropriately, which, as before, there was a real competition to have access to that because of all the athletic events that we had. But now that we have double the turf with lights, there's going to be more opportunity for them to be down there when they're willing to relocate their instruments and travel that far.
Okay.
We think that they'll take advantage of that for that very reason.
Yeah, they need the space. Okay. And then,
Steph, can I just add, like, our band teachers are part of every one of these conversations.
Okay.
So they're signing off on, like, this is adequate space, this makes sense for us, that type of thing. Marching, getting down to the other fields for that section is no big deal.
right.
But we have competition bands, and
Right.
so it's all the other equipment that they really need close to the building, which is
Right.
why they want to practice. Like, we could assign them one of the turf fields. They don't want one of the turf fields because it's getting all of the other major equipment, not what they're walking with as they march down to those spaces, which is why front or back of the building is important.
Right. I just have one minor comment, and you guys can kick me under the table if you want. On the graphic that you were showing, we have the academic wing. And personally, I think we might want to avoid calling just the core curriculum academic and excluding the other stuff on things that we
Yep.
share outside.
That's fair.
That's all. Thank
Yeah.
you.
It's terms architects use, but educators and board members think more deeply than that.
Thanks, Stephanie. Amber, would you like to go next?
Thank you for the presentation and all the work you've done with this. It really is exciting to drive by and see all of the progress, and these plans are just beautiful. And I so applaud everyone who is in this right now, not only the administrators here in the room, but also the teachers and the students, because I know this is hard. And you talked about, the parking issues and some of the other short-term situations that are coming about because of this construction, but you didn't say anything about noise, or I missed it maybe. Is that, is the construction's happening during the school day, right?
It is. Some of it happens before, and they usually stop around 3, so it's not after school, but during school there is some construction noise, but we're being very sensitive to when that happens and how that happens, and when Pete says there's a test day, we reschedule things and we make sure we work around those kind of things. But yeah, it's naturally a neighbor-to-neighbor noise thing, and that goes to the neighborhoods as well as the students in the school, so we're definitely sensitive to it and thoughtful about it.
Are the teachers scheduling tests on certain days, or I mean, I
They
guess
have
what
test
kind of
days that we know
collaboration?
that are coming, and so
Okay.
we try to coordinate with that. And Pete and Matt have each other's cell phones, and they talk every day.
Yeah,
I need this, I need that, I can't do this today.
right.
You can do this today. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's good to know that,
Well,
what is it?
we meet weekly as well. We have a principal meeting that's very collaborative, and we meet with the assistant principals as well. Pretty good information to share back and forth.
Well, good. It's wonderful to hear that it's on time and on budget and all of those things. I had a question too about the band the little square. It looks so little on the map, but hearing that it's from the 30 to the 30,
Yeah,
because you're right.
it's a half
That
football field,
typically
right?
is sort of the staging area. Is that gravel though? Is that
It's
grass?
limestone fines, so it's a very fine limestone fill that goes over gravel. So it firms up. It's like the outfield track on a baseball field. It's, you can walk on it, you can stripe it. Again, it's not unusual for that to work. It's like a cinder track kind of composition when you walk on it. So it is something that band can practice on.
Okay.
And especially because it's dry when it's wet. It's not like a grass field where there's mud and wet.
I think the only other question I had is, I love all of the natural light. I love all of the green space. I think that's fantastic. This is being built to a LEED standard, right?
It
Can you
is.
talk a little
We're
bit
not
about
getting the
that?
LEED credential, but we're using LEED standards, and we're going to have a very high sustainability rating and very low energy usage, and those kind of things are all built into this design. And again, it started with the board, and it came through all the engineers to the design.
Wonderful. I think that's all.
Thanks, Amber. Kelly?
Thank you. I can't even imagine what you do daily, weekly, hourly, probably. So I appreciate you taking the time. And I do appreciate it being broken down, because I'll be honest, I'll have to go back and listen to this presentation again, just to try to get all of the nitty gritty about it. I have some of my initial questions have already been answered, but Randy, you talked about the traffic flow and the new temporary traffic flow that will happen around Thomas, and that will happen for 2 years, not just the 1 year. Is that right?
Well, the parking lot situation is actually going to be more challenging during the summer of '25 than it will be for '24. But once that walkway is established, I think that it will be better. The temporary parking for parents is going to be in green on this chart. And the challenge with it in the temporary state is that walkway is not there.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, you could have cars trying to back out of their spot at the same time as parents are lining up.
Gotcha.
So one of the things we've talked about was maybe designating half of that green line area as staff parking, and they wouldn't be leaving at that time. They would still be in the building, whereas the kids would be leaving, to try to make sure that cars aren't backing into that area at the same time parents are lining up. But once the walkway's in, parents will kind of be able to hug that tree line boulevard, and they won't run into that problem.
And you think that walkway will be in the summer of 25?
25, correct.
The modulars are going away, right? Now you make me not want to call it the academic wing. Now that the front classrooms are going to be finished for 24, then we no longer need the modulars. Are we doing with this?
I believe the modules will go back since they were rented. So
Okay.
we don't want to pay another year rent unless we need them. The contractors would gladly use that space for parking because that's at a premium, as we explained. And then because we're adding that lift and the second story of the old academic wing is still accessible, they're going to take advantage of some of the classroom space up there. And so at this point, I think Pete has a plan with his team that will work, that will allow those portable classrooms to go back to their owner.
Perfect. That's wonderful. You mentioned about some groups being impacted. I know we've talked about band. We haven't really talked about theater with the auditorium going away. I know that we hold a lot of things, convocation in the auditorium. And so just how are we dealing with theater, for example?
Yeah, that's great. So Emily's been working on options for that and coordinating shared space with Worthington Kilbourne for large performances. I think there's been some conversations with the MAC for some smaller shows. And we have been in conversation with Kilbourne Middle School for as far as practice space after school that would still give you that stage atmosphere for, again, smaller performances. It's not quite as large. And then we've relocated all of their materials to rental space. So they still have access to all of their costumes, all of their materials. That's in a rental location right now. So they'll still be able to run an operation. It just will have a few more obstacles. And then we'll return the favor for Kilbourne High School when their auditorium's under construction. They'll be able to come to Thomas and share. So there'll be a little bit of overlap.
Okay. I love that. Sorry. I wrote notes all over, so, and I wasn't consistent with them, so I apologize for that, but you said, you talked about Thomas not being available for outside groups. Like, I know that we have outside organizations that utilize, so in conjunction with this, because it's all about communication, and you know, I like communication, so anything that you feel like needs to be heavily emphasized that's different from what you originally presented to us over in 21, for example, or even last year, and communication about you may not be able to utilize Thomas for a year or two while we're doing this amazing project. Thank you for your patience, but is there anything that you think needs to be emphasized to community members, students, and families that, hey, we said this was going to happen, but this change is kind of coming, that we could know to communicate individually and then just collectively as a district?
Yeah, we've begun those conversations. So I meet regularly with WYB and make sure that they're aware that perhaps the baseball field behind Thomas Worthington won't be accessible because parking will be at a premium. We've talked with the pool. We've had a collaborative meeting with many stakeholders with the pool to learn about their large events and making sure that we're not scheduling large other events like with the athletic program on those days. We've met with the city and talked about the 4th of July and fireworks. So those conversations are occurring. I think our biggest problem, I think we take for granted what that space does for our community, and it can be used for 4 different events at the same time and no one even blinks. But moving forward for the next year and a half, we're going to have to be very intentional and not overbooking that space, or we're going to run into some parking problems. We've also talked with Molly about any bus that comes for an event to drop off a visiting team, that perhaps that driver will go to Linworth and park their bus, maybe walk down to Dunkin' Donuts, enjoy that part of Linworth, see downtown Linworth, kind of be a thing. But keeping a bus off the property takes up 3 to 4 spaces for cars, and parking will be at a premium. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get to the point where we have that list, but we're working on with the larger groups at this time.
Okay. This is a big project, right? And there's a lot of moving pieces and parts. So what will be helpful for me individually is just like, if there's something that you want us to be able to communicate well in a small bit that is helpful to people so that they understand all the changes that are going on, please let us know. Like a cheat sheet, what is that when you cheat, never cheated, so like, what is that called? They're yellow. What are the
Cliff
books
Notes?
called?
Cliff Notes.
Thank you. The Cliff Note version of it.
I think that's what they're called.
Like I said, I'm definitely gonna have to go watch this again just to absorb all the information. I really appreciate the presentation. And again, I appreciate that it's broken down. Next time we'll learn about Kilbourne, and so I appreciate that. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks. I'll express my gratitude as well. My family and I have been doing puzzles all winter, and like none of them compares to what you guys are doing on a daily basis. So if I'm really, I don't know, I can't think of the terminology I want to use because it seems like such a mean gift, but I might have to give you like a puzzle of Thomas when this is all done. And it'll be like, that is the easiest part of this puzzle that I've done, an actual puzzle, the picture of the new building. So a lot to take in. I agree with Kelly, but you guys have done a great job. A lot of my questions have been answered. I think a few of them I'm just going to go over again just to make sure, and a few things that haven't been asked. So as you mentioned, the Ox Gym up at the beginning, and then you asked about, the walking around. So it sounds like 1/4 of it is going to be, at least 1/4 of it is going to be walled off, which allows the other 3 parts of it to be used still as the auxiliary gym is currently used, or the Ox Gym is currently used, excuse me. And I assume that's where the conversations with WIB come in and whatnot, that's just going to limit what, we have to prioritize our high school student experience. And I've heard you say that so many times, and I'm grateful for that. And I want our community to know that that's what you all are doing, is prioritizing that experience as they, live through this construction. You mentioned, Kelly asked about the theater. The other thing I was thinking about that was going away with the demolition that will happen this summer, and I don't know when that's happening this summer, but I assume it's not going to be a matter of the building being ready and, well, yeah, September is already working into the fall. What are the teachers going to do over the summer? Essentially, they're going to have to move out of a space, but not have a space to move into. So can you just talk through that in part so that we can support them, right? So those of us who have, so the PTSO can support them, the boosters can support them and things like that.
Yeah, Jeff Ebley probably can answer this a little better than I can, but I will tell you that Pete has done a wonderful job of sending out regular reminders to staff that there is a big dumpster on the property, and if you want to get rid of anything, you're welcome to go throw it away now. So that message goes out about every other month, and believe it or not, we're beginning to kind of declutter, and some of our staff that have been in the same room for over a decade can accumulate. And so a lot of that's going away. Obviously, we'll take care of the furniture and assist them with that move, but there are some personal belongings that I think have probably already found their way home for the summer or in those type of moves. So Jeff, you want to kind of fill us in on the plan there?
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. Honestly, we're targeting about a 2-week period when it's going to be a switch from one area to the other. It's not going to be a long, slow, easy move. So we're going to have an army that's going to be able to come in, and we may be working double shifts to do that. But we'll end the year. I don't like to ever throw out dates, but sometime in May, we will begin demolition of the center core of the building, and somewhere in there after we are out of school, we'll start making those moves. When the new wing, academic wing, new classroom wing of the building is being completed, when we get to substantial completion, before it's done and turned over, we'll be able to start moving furniture in. But obviously, we can't move that furniture till school's out. So I think I just said May, I mean June. When school is out, then we'll have a short time period that we'll try and get all of that finished move done and get it in place.
Okay, that's helpful. Randy, you said earlier that we wouldn't take possession until September. And so in my mind, I was like, imagine moving from, August to September, and then all of a sudden, like, everything's supposed to happen and it just doesn't happen like that. And we know that. So there'll be some moving in of furniture and whatnot, teachers able to prepare their space as finishing things are happening to the building, as the building is being finished, such that hopefully then, in beginning of September, if not sooner, we would be ready to start classes. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is. And maybe to put your minds a little bit at ease, this isn't dramatically different than what we did in the middle schools. As the new sections of the middle schools were being completed and we got to a substantial completion, they're still finishing baseboards, they're still finishing paint trim, they're still finishing those kind of things. Furniture was all moving in and into the center of the room, in some cases covered, in other cases not, but you had to come in and do some cleanup from dust and what have you after that was done. But we'll begin moving as soon as we can get into the building once school is out to get things set in place and then make the final moves in about a 2-week period.
Okay, excellent. That's very helpful.
And
Thank
correct
you.
me if I'm wrong, Matt, but the auxiliary gym could be a temporary summer staging area for furniture that's going out of the demolished area and waiting to go into the new area. So I think, we'll have a lot of Thomas standing around us that we can use temporarily for the summer because it's not an active school. It's going to be, a lot of things moving one place and then moving to their final resting place.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Kelly asked about modulars. You guys covered parking sufficiently. When you guys are talking about event parking, are you talking about events during the school day? You're talking about after? Okay.
Yeah,
And the reason I ask that is that, I know we already have asks to the MAC regarding theater and whatnot, and they have events in the evening too, so that won't always work. But I know you guys have thought of everything. I'm just sharing thoughts as you were presenting. Possibility for not just the flats, but maybe even the MAC when they don't have events. What about Evening Street Elementary? I know there's not a ton of parking there, but is that an option for buses that come when they're busing in from other school districts, just so that they're in closer proximity? I don't know. Or maybe we don't want, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's some potential there for large events like football games where we could take advantage of Evening Street. What's probably more likely to compound the situation is I think Evening Street depended on some of that parking for their events, and that parking will no longer be available. So when they have their ice cream social, those parents will come on to Thomas's property and take.
Oh.
So it's going to be complicated. But like I said, I think what we've taken away, we've tried to replace in the front lawn. Then we've taken away an additional section in the student. And so we're going to have to monitor that and see and just make sure that we're working with teams that are coming to our school to make sure that they're aware. And Molly can be creative with that. Maybe suggest that they bring a spirit bus instead of 60 kids driving on their own, that type of thing. So for certain things.
Okay.
Can I just for clarity from a community standpoint, when we talk about some of our traffic challenges, a lot of them are self-induced, although well-intentioned, right? So we have 25 teams coming for a cross-country meet. We may need to make that 10 teams coming for a cross-country meet. We have 30 teams coming for a lacrosse tournament, right? We host a water polo tournament that is every team in the state. We run youth wrestling on Sunday all day because it's a booster fundraiser for the wrestling team, but it's not really a school thing, or youth basketball, or all summer American Legion baseball. So in the summer even, you might have the pool taking up 250 spots for the outdoor pool, but then you've got American Legion baseball playing 6 games on the Thomas Field, and you have somebody else who's utilizing the stadium for, say, WYB track or summer field hockey or whatever it is. And we've really just have to work to manage those things that we can control. But it really, each of those groups individually gets into habits and they see their thing. And so those are those conversations we're really trying to have. And then we're also trying to say, hey, if our aux gym is a third out, well, we may have to play some games in Worthington's gym. Maybe freshman games that used to be at Thomas are going to have to be at Worthington's gym, which then causes kids at the middle school to reschedule. That doesn't mean they won't get to do their things, but it means we have to coordinate with another entity. If theater is using the Kilbourne Middle School auditorium, that's great. But it may mean the Kilbourne Middle School thing that they've always done in February, we have to coordinate with those groups. So there's just going to be lots of shared coordination that has to happen. And as Randy's having conversation with groups like WYB, we're trying to really get the word out that everybody recognizes that this Thomas challenge exists. We're not sure they totally understand the trickle down of that challenge and how that really does impact an elementary school program because, we've always held our elementary wrestling program in the Thomas aux gym. Well, we'll be able to do all those things again and better than we ever have. But we're going to go through this 18-month period where it's a challenge for all of those pieces. And so those are the events that we struggle with. They're really more weekend events than they are school events. Like I feel really comfortable with the operation of school on a daily basis. But we've been meeting with the city about the 4th of July and, trying to just, how do you deal with that? Can you make that happen during this construction period of time? When the MAC has their art center or Old Worthington days, market days, and we've typically been the parking lot for some of those events, and Anthem's been used recently, but there's just impact to just lots of different things. Everybody knows it's coming. What we're trying to help them now see is, hey, that there's going to just be some real impact there. So.
That's helpful. Thank you, Trent. I guess I will just piggyback on the shared coordination. The other thing that I wanted to raise I had a big caveat too. And that is, just like we all have to, coordinate and have realistic expectations, I think that we also have to have realistic expectations of the end product. And so the comment I'm getting ready to make, I know, is my personal comment and something that I hope we would come up with the magical solution. There's going to be a million of those, right? People are going to look at a new auditorium and go, this is amazing, but why didn't you do X, Y, Z? This is amazing in another space, but why didn't you do X, Y, Z? Because there's always going to be everyone's going to want the best in their space, and that's just not realistic. So I ask you this question with a big caveat that I know you guys have looked at traffic a million times in a million ways. And my hope is that we don't set this site up for an experience where 30 years later, the next group is trying to improve traffic and saying, why didn't they do something 30 years before, right? Which is kind of what we're doing at Kilbourne. And so I look at those 3 lines coming out of that space, one space on our property, and I don't even need a summary of what you guys have explored and what's possible. I just ask that we continue to look at traffic options, even if it's maybe even widening that space so that during certain key times like dismissal or student entry, there are designated lanes that can be used and go to a certain part. I don't know. I'm not a traffic engineer. And so I don't have the solutions. I just want to make sure we're not punting a traffic problem to be addressed 30 years later.
The upside of a school is you ultimately learn how to use the site. People who come to football games learn. The first meeting I had with Eric and the first meeting I had with Pete, I stood out in the parking lot and Pete would say, now watch what this parent does. They did a U-turn and they jumped over a curb and then and he said, we learn what we can control and what we can't control. And so the upside is that there's a lot of opportunity to improve by learning. The downside is there's absolute limitations in property dimensions. There's a railroad track at Kilbourne we can't jump over and have a south exit. So those are things we can't fix, but I think we are learning, and people will tell you, when I go to Kilbourne football games, this is what I do because I know I can't get out for 45 minutes if I do something else.
Good.
And so it's part of that experience is that it's a site where you get to train people, unlike you do at a grocery store or a public library or even a football stadium. You don't get to train people how to deal with, but I'll tell you how I go to Ohio State games and how I don't, because I've learned where it goes south.
I appreciate that. There are site constraints, there are financial constraints to what we can do in every single space, and not everyone's going to be happy with everything because we have constraints. Yeah, it's not feasible. So appreciate your continued work, not just on traffic, but in all areas.
It never ends. It
Yeah.
never ends. Not the day the school gets turned over, it doesn't end. It's a constant learning and refining process.
Yeah.
I think it would be appropriate to say that the way they've designed this building is for flexibility. So what we're showing you today is what our plan looks like when we open the building. But because of the way they've designed it, we have some options and modifications that we could make in order to improve it. And I think that with this construction project and having that road go across the front, we greatly added an option that could serve us differently if we wanted to make some changes. And then we're talking about the landscape building in the back behind Evening Street. Maybe that disappears in the future, and that gives us an opportunity to do something different back there. So the gears are always turning, but I would acknowledge that parent drop-off didn't get a lot better with this plan compared to where we're at now, like we had intended. So there's room to continue to tinker with that. And I think your ideas about the way that exit looks and widening that would certainly assist that as well during that brief time, but really frustrating time if you're in line.
Well, I appreciate that, and I really do appreciate the fact there are financial constraints, there are site constraints, and I appreciate hearing the fact that how this has been designed gives us options going forward to flex and to make changes as we see fit. So thank you for an excellent presentation and your time and effort and energy towards this incredibly complicated project.
And thank you for all supporting us. It does not go unnoticed. thanks to Jeff for figuring out the technology.
All right, that brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Bowers.
Awesome. So it's hard to follow that. Guys, our mission in Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. We think we're on track with our new facilities. Tonight was the first one of those presentations. We'll have a Worthington Kilbourne presentation in 2 weeks and a natatorium presentation 2 weeks after that. But these really are facilities that we think will help our students meet our mission. So we're excited about that. In Worthington, we have 4 vision statements. So we break up this report under each vision statement. So our first vision statements, we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. So in Worthington, our diverse community of learners includes students who were born in 98 different countries. The number changes all the time, but right now it's 98 different countries. So all 796 Worthington students, so almost 800 students, who qualify as English learners will participate in Ohio-required English language proficiency assessments over the next 3 weeks. So this test includes 3 group test sections. There's a read, a write, and a listen, a one-on-one speaking test. Students who score at a high range of all sections will actually exit that English language identification. Obviously, our goal as a student transitions through high school is to be ready to not need extra supports, because when they graduate from high school, those supports no longer exist. So we're hoping students do exit because they've shown that ability to do so. Progress on this test is calculated at the gap closure measure on the district building ODE report card, but more importantly, it's a chance for students to show their growth. So students from 98 countries, almost 800 different students that are English language learners will participate in that. Second, we will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. As you know, Ohio will experience a once-in-a-lifetime total solar eclipse on April 8th, 2024. We've been communicating about that. We've previously communicated an early release on that day, but tonight I want to communicate that I think it's best that we close school for Monday, April 8th. So surrounding school districts, Columbus, Dublin, Olentangy, and Westerville, so the 4 districts that surround our boundaries, have all previously announced that they will not have school on this day. The concern really for this day is the traffic expected in our region and the ability with that traffic to get students safely home from school. So the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce provided guidance to school districts to evaluate safety concerns. And as I went through those as superintendent and talked with our local police department, our local fire department, really my major concern is the traffic on the north side, and would we have the ability to run buses? Guys, that's an unknown. It's hard to really know what to expect on that day. Some will tell you that there'll be gridlock in this area. Again, hard to gauge that, but it's a risk I think it's too big to take that we have buses stuck somewhere and can't get kids home from school. The total solar eclipse in Worthington will begin April 8th at 1:55 p.m. and continue through 4:30 p.m. So it's a duration of 2 hours and 31 minutes. But totality, what we're all waiting for, will arrive at 3:12 p.m. And depending on where you are in the district, so Worthington is in the path of totality, 30 seconds at Kilbourne Middle School, but up to 85 seconds at Liberty Elementary School. So we'll put out some communication that has a link. You can find your exact house, but also by school that duration. But we are in that path. So we will be communicating with families later this week that we plan to close for April 8th. Our third vision statements, we will provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. Last week, we hosted 2 different community coffee events in an effort to be accessible to families who have questions or just want to learn more about Worthington schools. Tuesday evening was what we call a decaf coffee because it's in the evening. And Friday morning was a coffee focused on middle school and high school with our Director of Secondary Education, Emily Greenwald. Our next morning coffee is scheduled for March 15th, and our featured guest is our Director of Business Services, Jeff Ebley. So if you want to talk construction, maintenance of facilities, playgrounds, anything in that realm, Jeff will be there that morning, and we hope that people put March 15th on their calendar. And then our final vision statements, we will be responsible and transparent with our community resources. So school finance in Ohio is a confusing subject. As a reminder, even though Ohio increased school funding in the latest state budget, Worthington is a predominantly locally funded school district, with local revenues accounting for 79% of our total revenue in our fiscal year 2023. So local revenue consists mainly of property taxes, which totaled $159.8 million for the school district. Of that amount, 66% comes from residential property and 34% from commercial and industrial property, which is quite different than it was 15 years ago. 15 years ago, the split from residential to commercial was 50-50. So this split difference is due to a reduction in taxes assessed to businesses over the past few decades by the state legislature, which has had positive impact on the state economy, but also leading to more reliance on residential property taxes for a district like Worthington. We want to always remind folks that residential burden continues to be large in a place like Worthington. President Hudson, that's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers. Does anyone want to ask any questions or make any comments regarding what Dr. Bowers shared?
Wow. Thank you for April 8th. I know you've done a lot of talking to teachers and talking to Brian Genius and getting a lot of feedback. Traffic is a big concern. I mean, it's not just Worthington traffic about just like, hey, come to my house to watch it, but it's the through. I mean, if you think about that, 161, 23, you know, a lot of traffic comes through there. And just people are going to be heading that northwest direction. And so I appreciate, even though it's unknown, erring on the side of yes. Now, we do have a board meeting that
I was going to bring that up.
and I think we've given you feedback about we're okay. Like, we're okay to continue with that meeting. And I just
feel
want to
like,
bring that up.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very different risk of us navigating traffic or finding that it's gridlock and we can't get here and we have to pivot than it is a risk of having schools full of students that we can't get home because it's gridlock. So that was my rationale.
I just want to indicate that. Go ahead, Stephanie. Sorry.
I was just going to say it's so much later in the day, the meeting. So
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to close. It's not worth the risk, but the board meeting is a different scenario.
Good. Good. Thanks for bringing that up, Kelly. So our community members don't scratch their head of why we're closing school, but still planning on having our board meeting. Go ahead,
Thank you.
Amber.
Can we have these? Can we talk about these for a second? Because I think these are related, right?
They are related. So those are Eclipse viewing glasses. If you were to put them on, you'll see they say Worthington across the front. We have 1,500 of those. So all of our students and staff members will go home the weekend before with their Eclipse viewing glasses. Well done. So we're excited about that. The Worthington Public Library System, so the 3 libraries in our school district that serve our Worthington School District, also has glasses. So if you, so again, we're going to provide glasses to all of our students, all of our staff members. But if someone in the community has family members that's looking for glasses, they want to hop on the Worthington Library website. I forget the date they start. It's mid-March that they start passing those out. But I think that's enough for all family members. And we will have lots of Eclipse lessons. So our science teachers are very excited about sharing with our students this experience. And that really, that's the downside of closing school. Right? Like in 2017, we had school on an eclipse day. We brought everybody outside with their glasses. It was super cool. But a partial solar eclipse is just different than the total solar eclipse and a different risk from a traffic standpoint because we're in that path of totality. And so, but I think our teachers are excited and our kids will be ready for the eclipse and hopefully wearing Worthington glasses to do it.
Excellent. I think you meant 15,000, right?
Did I
You
say
said 1,500. Okay, just
Yes,
making sure we're all.
15,000, sorry.
You're good. If
1,500 would
anyone
not be
else
enough.
heard
We're gonna
that,
share
exactly.
them.
Pass them around in the 80 seconds
You're
or
correct.
30
Sorry about
seconds,
that.
wherever you're good. You're totally good. Excellent. Thank you, Trent. Mr. Cusick, would you like to share the treasurer's report?
Sure. So a relatively quiet week financially, as most folks in my line of work are wrapping up year end, getting W-2s out, tax information out. So that's taking up most of our time. But I am going to expound upon what Dr. Bauer said regarding property tax shift, as the Property Tax Reform Committee met again last week, this time hearing from various business stakeholders such as the Ohio Chamber of Commerce and the Ohio Business Roundtable. Those folks testified that their members' main concerns when they poll them are property taxes and local income taxes, and they feel that is a regulatory barrier to business growth in Ohio. However, when pressed by Senator Blessing is one of the members on the committee, who cited the recent trend, as Trent had mentioned, in the trend down in business taxes and up in residential taxes in Ohio. The groups did acknowledge that Ohio has become much more competitive over the past 8 to 10 years in terms of the business regulatory environment. In fact, the report that they cited in the back now ranks Ohio as the 9th best state to start a business, according to Forbes in 2023. And so the committee then got into discussion about tax incentives and whether they're needed now, and also discussed broad-based tax relief versus targeted tax relief. The thought process when they say broad-based would be tax relief for everyone, that might just add to inflationary buildup in home prices, because if taxes are reduced, essentially you can pay more for your house. And so with a limited housing supply, they're worried that just creates more inflation on property values. And so there would seem to be more desire for a targeted tax relief. And so unrelated but similar, House Bill 263 had a conference committee. It is known as the 7070 bill. So it would essentially freeze property taxes for those 70 years old and up, and who make $70,000 and less. And so this was a stopgap, if you will, to reduce taxes on that targeted population. That was amended this past week to reduce 70 years old to 65 years old and reduce the income qualifier down to 50,000. So now it's 65 and 50. So far, the good news with that is the state is making local governments whole, right? So similar to the current homestead and rollback, they are reimbursing the local government, the school district, for those credits. And so we'll watch that closely. Those are the only two updates that I have.
Excellent. Thank you, TJ.
Can I ask one question? The 7070 bill, is that and/or?
I think it's both.
So you have to be 70 years old
right.
and make less than
And I think they
70,000.
added a further qualifier that the property itself couldn't be valued over $500,000 or $1 million. Don't quote me on that. It's one or the other. But they added a qualifier in terms of the value of the property itself.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I guess I'll just share, I think that what you both shared in the space of taxes and the impact on how public school is funded. We've talked before about maybe if we had like a regular space on our website for pending legislation that impacts public schools. Maybe it's a good time to just revisit it and think about some key facts regarding public school funding. I don't know, we can have that discussion, a full-fledged discussion at a later point, but I know our website's in the process of being redesigned, right? So maybe, and I'm looking at Vicki, our Director of Communications, for those of you who can't see that, maybe having something in the new design that's focused on like those key facts so that we keep, our community member knows regularly where to go and keep those key facts regarding the funding of public education in the forefront of their minds would be beneficial to the public at large. So just something for us to think about
I
and
agree.
continue to explore.
I think to the extent that we can, it should link out to existing resources because we don't want to curate them, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that just maintaining that might be a challenge just with amending and committee substitutes and everything like that. But
linking out.
yeah, right, you could maintain that. Or I was going to suggest maybe it's something that during these meetings, maybe once a month, we have like a legislative update kind of a thing. I mean,
Yeah, that's something that I will be able to provide just from the OSBA, because I'm the legislative liaison, so as I receive them, I absolutely will be able to. So, yes, so we could include both of them, right? Those are both resources. Okay. We can continue to evolve that. Okay, good. Well, we can continue the discussion also, because that brings us to board committee reports and announcements. Sure.
Only just what you just said. So I'm going out of order. I wanted to say this last. It doesn't really matter. But you and I had a meeting, Nikki and I had a meeting with Worthington City Council President Rachel Dorothy and President Pro Tem Beth Kowalczyk about liaisons. And so one thing I want to say, so Amber is actually the OSBA legislative liaison.
Oh, thank goodness. I was like, because when you said that, I was like, well, then I should have had so you are. I'm glad you've been tracking that. I'm so glad, because I literally was thinking, gosh, I should have had an update for today. I'm a different OSBA liaison, and they just added me to that roster last week. So I'll go back and figure out. It's not the legislative one. Which one is it?
Probably like the academic achievement.
It is
one.
the
When you're
academic
board
achievement one. Thank
president,
you.
That's what
Thank
you
you.
end up being.
And I just got that message last week. So thank you
And
for
usually
that.
the board president is a delegate.
Yes,
OSBA.
indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So part of being that is bringing to the board. And actually the other thing is like, not just bringing to the board, and like, there are ways that we can explore what is the best way to share that information. So if you get an update, if you get an email update that's a legislative update, to send that to the rest of us from them. And have you started getting updates from
so
them?
I just got my first one.
Okay, well, that makes me feel good about that.
I had
just
to
got
reach.
the other one.
I had to reach out because there's a regular one that they send. It's called the Link, and it has some of the breakdown of some of the pending legislation that directly affects public schools and public education. So, yeah, I think I could forward that on
Thank
to
you.
you all.
I feel like that would be helpful. Do you guys?
In more of an
good.
immediate manner, and then maybe when we come together, maybe it's not every meeting, maybe it's just once a month. I guess we could feel it out. But yeah, have some type of just an update on what's pending and what's being discussed, and testifying opportunities and things like that.
Exactly. Because I feel like Charlie used to just give the update that he received. And if you could send that, then we have the pre-read. Then we're all coming in with a bit more knowledge coming into the meeting, and we can have more substantive discussion as to opportunities.
It evolves so quickly too.
Yes, that's very true. Yes. Okay. Kelly, sorry to
So
derail that.
with that conversation, and Nikki, you can chime in with anything I leave out. It's just that we have a liaison assigned, Stephanie, to Worthington, and what Worthington City Council is looking to have potentially, to have a discussion about if they want to have a liaison to the school district. And what that looks like for them, they're gonna have a conversation amongst their whole city council on their own. But then we also need to have a conversation about what that looks like for us. And not right now. This is just for us to take a little bit of time to think about all these liaison positions that we have, Swim Inc., the legislative liaison, what that looks like, and how often do we have a report, for example, so we know what to expect. I like having that conversation at the table. I like for our administrators to be able to hear what's going on, and for our community, obviously, to hear, especially about legislation that impacts education. Education Foundation, and what we want to get out of that, what our expectation is. So I'm not picking on you, Amber, but like if our expectation is that once a month you give us a report, or once a month, or however you get your updates, that then you forward it to them. Like, we need to know what our expectations are. And then those entities need to know what to expect from us. Like, do you expect full engagement, with the City of Columbus? Do you expect full engagement with Swim Inc.? We need to kind of have that conversation so that it's not just putting our name next to a liaison, that it actually has purpose next to it. So I was thinking about just if we could be thinking about that in between our between now and our next meeting, so that we can have a productive conversation to kind of figure out what that is. And then we can kind of give direction to our administration about who the contact should be, because that was something that we talked about when we talked to Beth and Rachel about who the contact would be. Like, when would you contact the city council liaison, those kind of things. So,
So I'm just going to jump in real quick that we've had those conversations before. It may have just been before you joined the board. So just to set, the record clear, it's not as though we just had positions and our names next to them and never talked about what the expectations were. So with 2 new board members, I do think it is the appropriate time to revisit what the expectations are from those positions, because absolutely there's no expectation. Like, if you were the liaison with the city of Worthington, that you were going to go to every single city council meeting, like that would be a huge lift. Or even listen to every single council meeting. And as we talked about it previously, our expectation was never that the liaison role would replace Trent's relationship with the manager of city council manager, right? Like that's first and foremost, and you are still running the district. It's just helpful to have other individuals who can build relationships and have conversations around key projects or things that might be difficult or things along, those lines. So let's absolutely have the conversation again and figure out what this board wants to accomplish with those positions.
yeah, and I'm sure you've had it before. It's just obviously I haven't been part of that. And with obviously Stephanie and Amber haven't been part of that. So it's always good to revisit those things.
Well, I think it evolves
that-
too, and I think it dovetails really nicely into the conversation that we left our work session intending to have around goals and things like that, board goals and things like that, because I think there are certain things that you get out of those relationships in the liaison positions that can map into those goals too.
Absolutely. And I mean, we had a day's worth of conversation of how we work together as a team. So that's a logical next step.
Yeah, so
is
that
applying
conversation
it.
could include like historic, conversations that you and Jennifer have had previously. And so add that to the conversation just so we can kind of get a good understanding of what the expectation is. So that's one. I went to Trent's Community Decaf Coffee, where we talked about early literacy, we talked about cell phones, and we talked about the state of the schools, which is March 13th at 7 o'clock at Kilbourne High School. I think it's going to be great. I get excited about it. Look at Facebook memories, right? And I've been excited about the state of the schools before I was a board member. So this is enthusiasm that dates back to my kids in middle school, which they're not babies anymore. I do encourage people to attend the community coffees. They just great conversation. It was a smaller group, but that didn't matter. We had good discussion, and I always learn something new, and so I think they're very valuable. So I thank you for hosting those and your administration for helping out with those. My last thing is that I was scheduled to participate in the student feedback session on February 20th. The time changed, and so now I can't attend that. It's at Thomas. I believe Emily is leading that discussion. So if you can look at your calendars, I know there's another person already scheduled. I can't remember who that person is, but
It was Jennifer, but now it's me. Because I already switched one out too.
What time is it?
it's at 11:15. That's a Tuesday, I believe. So if Nikki is there, we don't have to have 2 board members, but if someone wants to fill my spot, feel free. February 20th at 11:15. That's it. That's all I got.
Thanks, Kelly. And honestly, thanks to everyone for, you didn't mention because we were all there, but I think our community needs to know that we spent Friday from 8 a.m. until like 4:15 together, doing some really great work to set ourselves up to work well as a team. And that's very much foundational work that will then impact the follow-up conversations like, what do we want our liaison positions to look like? What do we want our committee positions to look like? How do we communicate that in the best way to each other so that we're, helping each other understand what the full picture looks like that's going on in our district. So yeah, really, really good work on Friday.
Yeah, it was lots of fun, getting to know everyone a little bit better and sort of building that team. So Stephanie and I attended Board 101, which was a 2-day session. Gosh, what was that, 2 weeks ago, I guess? Yeah, so it was an all-day thing with OSBA, Ohio School Board Association, and I don't know about you, I found it very, very helpful because as we do start this job, there is, a lot of information that you don't know. And so that was a really good session to just, we heard, from the legislative liaison with the OSBA and the legal aspects of this job that are vast, and was very relieved to know there's a hotline that you can call if you have a legal question about sunshine law or anything like that, which trying to navigate that and make sure that, not violating anything is important. And so that was a really good experience, I think, and I'm very, very thankful that we did that and that the district supported us doing that and helping with this transition as we come onto the board. Did the retreat, also attended, which I know several of you did too, the Groundhog Day luncheon with the Worthington Chamber of Commerce. It was a great event. It's the first time I've ever attended that event. And it's just wonderful to meet some people from the community and hear an update from our superintendent, but also from some community members on things that are happening in Worthington. And it was a really fun luncheon. And yeah, I think that's all I had. I had a little misunderstanding about the internal communication session, so I missed the last two, but they are on my calendar now, and I will make the next one, which I think is coming up next week, soon. It's coming up soon. So trying to get all of this stuff squared away and
It's a lot.
clear on my calendar.
Yeah, give yourself grace.
I didn't have
It's a lot.
the proper understanding for that event, so sorry
It's
about
all
that.
good.
but
No problem.
Looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, Amber. Stephanie, would you like to go next?
Sure. I just wanted to say something really brief before I give my updates, just because it's important to me. We've talked at our board retreat, we talked a lot about how focused all of us are on making sure our students succeed and supporting our teachers and all of that. And so I think it's really important that everybody, all of our students and our staff and our administrators and our teachers understand that regardless of what vitriol is happening in the world around us, and I'm thinking about House Bill 68, but it could be anything, that they understand that that isn't always reflective of how we view them and how we value them in Worthington, in this district. And I know we said it in our statement, but I truly believe that we cannot say it enough. And that regardless of whatever is the legislation that's trying to happen, or regardless of what's happening in the media, that it is important to us that all of you are here, and that you all have a place here. But I think the most important thing that I want to convey personally is that we are better as a community because all of you are here, and that's how we are strong, and that's how we grow as a community. So I will move on to my updates, but I felt like I needed to say that. Okay, so the last time I was here, I said, I have nothing. I've only been here 2 weeks, and then the fire hose opened. So here we are. We did go to School Board 101, and I agree with everything Amber said. The only thing that I would add is it was really nice. It was the Central Ohio region. So it was really nice to connect with other board members in the area, because I think those relationships and building those relationships are going to be really important for all of us going forward. We don't need to operate in a vacuum. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So it's great to know who we can talk to in Central Ohio. And also just to know where the resources that OSBA has available, so that we can continue to learn. I mean, I know you guys know they were there, but this is new to me. So I also went to the Groundhog Day forecast luncheon. They said it was the largest that they've had recently. So a key takeaway for me too is just how engaged the community around us is becoming. We saw that when we have done some events recently since I've been on the board, and I'm thankful that we are having these conversations and people are coming to the table to come together and share their perspectives, because I think that's how we're going to continue to grow. So I've got a bunch of events at the library the Worthington Library has done. They are truly a gift to our community. So I went to, if you guys don't know, the Worthington Alliance of Black Families and Educators, along with the McConnell Art Center and the Worthington Libraries, do a movie series every February called Black Joy. And so I was able to go to the Woman King several weeks ago. And I would encourage anybody that hasn't gone to them to check them out because they are free. They are good family events. And there is one more in March, although I didn't write the date down. I think maybe the 9th, but I'm not sure.
I think it's the 9th.
I think it's the 9th. Okay, thank you. So there's one more. So if you haven't been, it's The Princess and the Frog, and who doesn't love The Princess and the Frog? So check that out. Also was very fortunate to see Ta-Nehisi Coates, and several other people were as well. I bring that up. It wasn't in Worthington, but it was co-sponsored by the Worthington Library. So again, just really thankful for the outside perspectives that the library is bringing to our community. And we touched on the school board retreat, but I'll just say the only thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, I feel like we have a really good foundation coming out of that session to kind of work going forward. And it was really nice especially for me being new to the board, to have the opportunity to spend that much time in a room with everybody and have those conversations, some of them, difficult, which is what we should be doing, right? So that was great. We had an outside facilitator, and that was really great to be able to do that. So that's it.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll start with the retreat. Once again, I think we've all got that on our list. It was such a great day. I want to thank TJ and Trent for joining us and all the board members. And, I didn't know going in, oh my gosh, a whole day, but it went so fast and we got so much out of it. It was really worthwhile. So that was great. The facility committee met January 29th, which would have been Randy, Jeff, Tim, me, and Stephanie. That's okay, because a big part of what we talked about was the Thomas construction and the parking and some of the challenges we're going to have. And then we talked a little bit about our facility rental rates, which we haven't really changed, raised, looked at in probably a dozen years. So our administrators are starting to look at that, and will probably come to us with a plan this spring on rates for renting like the turf field with lights and the gyms and different things. So they'll be coming with a plan for that. And then the only other thing, I was asked to remind people about the Thomas Worthington High School Black History Program. Will be February 22nd at 7 o'clock, Thomas Worthington. Anyone who hasn't been to that yet, it's organized by guidance counselor Kathy Starks, but she sits back and lets the kids do it. The kids totally organize the program. They do song, dance, poetry, stories, and it's always a super good evening. So mark your calendars for that one. And that is all I have.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, singing, dancing, performing, reading.
He's doing a skit.
Okay, good.
All right.
He's a
So some
teenager, that's all I know.
Okay. We'll be there.
We have one at Worthington Kilbourne High School too, don't we? They have programming as well? Okay, we should just find out that date and share it out as well. So thank you, everyone. Most of what I've been to has already been mentioned with the exception of one. So Groundhog Day forecast luncheon, I echo everything that's been shared. This is the benefit of giving everyone, yes, exactly, it is.
Yeah.
And the retreat, obviously, we mentioned, and then, I love going to the key communicators meetings. So the fact that you weren't able to attend and I was able to attend, I don't know who I stood in for. It was you or Kelly, but it doesn't matter.
It was both of us.
There we go. I was glad I could go. It was a really small group this time, which doesn't always happen. But it was January 25th, and my goodness, that was the end of the month of gray, right? So let's give everyone grace there. So there wasn't a whole lot of discussion. Sometimes it's nicer. I guess nothing surprising is what I want to say. We talked about, a number of the sites in the broader community that we've looked at as a school district, whether it's I Am Boundless or Amazon. We talked about, when maybe we should have the next levy, which I know is something that starting to think about, which, don't worry, community, it's not tomorrow, it's way off, but, how far financially can we, does it make sense to plan for that? We talked about the fact that House Bill 68 had just passed, and that, we were looking at putting out a statement related to it. And then, also in connection with that, the very importance of GSA leaders in our high schools, and the important role that they play, and actually that, every single adult in this district plays in making sure that our students know, all of our students know that they are a key part of our diverse community and loved. So it was a good meeting. Had anything come out of that meeting that was time sensitive, just know I would not have violated the law by engaging in discussion, but I would have just shared it out. Because we can do that under the Sunshine Law. We just can't talk about it. And that's all I had. So we can move on to section E of our agenda for approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented in enclosure E1?
So moved.
Second.
No changes to them, any comments or questions? Okay, if you'll please call for the vote.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes,
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
motion carries. That brings us to your section, TJ.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Ed approve the appropriations modifications listed in your agenda. These are cross-object transferring from services or from supplies to services in the general fund that net to zero.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All right, if you'll please call for the vote.
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes,
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
motion carries. And that brings us to the consent agenda. Dr. Bowers.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. That's items F2 through F9 on your agenda. Items F2 through F9, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments? Call for the vote, please.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes,
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
excellent. Dr. Bowers?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education accept the donations from the individuals and organizations that are listed on G1 on your agenda. Item G1, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? TJ, would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes,
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
motion carries. This is our section where we talk about any questions or concerns or specific requests. Anything that falls under that? No? Okay, excellent. On our calendar then, our next regular board meeting is on February 26th at 6:30, whereas you've already heard this evening, we will have an update, construction update regarding Worthington Kilbourne High School. And then following that on March 11th for the natatorium construction update. In between that date and April 11th, as Kelly mentioned, we have State of the Schools. And then on April 8th is our next regular board meeting, and we can talk about what update or what presentation will be appropriate for that meeting. Any questions or comments?
Just to note that we only have one meeting in March because of spring break. So we
Yes,
have a big gap between those. That's another reason to try our best to have our meeting on the 8th.
on the April 8th, absolutely. Yes, you're exactly right. Excellent. All right, I think we are at the portion of our meeting where we can take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
TJ, would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining us.